Today in Llamas Love Lettering, we are going to be starting down the road of block bubble lettering. The road that everybody wants to try, but it's intimidating as fuck. Well, it is. It's block lettering is intimidating as fuck. But today we're going to start with uppercase block lettering. Why is block lettering so difficult to get the hang of? Well, if you think about it, it's because it is radically different than any other kind of handwriting or lettering we're used to. When you learn how to write, you learn how to write in printing, generally speaking. Sometimes you learn cursive, and if you want to do fancy lettering like with serifs or whatever the case may be, the base is the printing you started with when you were a kid. And if you want to learn brush lettering or foligraphy or any of that shit, the base is the cursive you learned as a kid. Sometimes you adjust it and shit like I do, like I'm never going to make a traditional cursive Q again because it looks like a fucking 2, but that's beside the point. What I'm getting at is that when you do block lettering, you are not making the letters that you did when you were a kid. You are tracing around them, and that is a completely different motion. The motion of the ocean, it's kind of a penile situation. The motion of the ocean when it comes to block lettering is different than anything you've done before. Once you get the hang of it, which can take a lot of time, be forewarned, that's when the world of bubble lettering and all that other shit starts to open up for you. But you have to get the basics first. Now is as good a time as any to start looking at the basics of how to block letter capital letters. I'm going to demonstrate kind of how you start a block letter, and I'm going to use this pink pen here, it's Tombow Twin Tone Marker, to represent, actually, make it even bolder, to represent a pencil, to make it easy to see. So when I normally write a letter A, my letter A is kind of like that, right? If you're going to make a block letter, though, you need to leave enough space to kind of create the block letter. So you see how I kind of made it a little bit bigger, a little bit more open? Then what you do is you take your pen and you start working your way around it, trying really hard to keep consistency in the distance between the inside skeleton of the letter and the outside walls. Do you see kind of that? Now it's not necessarily easy to keep consistency when you're making them this way, but this will at least give you the idea of how to start a bubble letter. So like with the B, my normal B kind of looks like this, but I made it bigger and more open, and I'm going to trace around it, trying to stay as consistent as possible. And then what you would do is erase the pencil marks, and that gives you a block letter. Now, these basic motions to create a block letter are the foundation of pretty much any bubble lettering, anything else that you do. The worksheets that I'm providing for this session, instead of going through this method, I'm just giving you a version to trace so you can start feeling the motion of it, right? Like you can figure out how to actually create the letter, and then once you get the hang of that, then you can turn around and start making it your own. If you would like to see a really more in-depth version of this, stay tuned because I'm going to have some interesting things on the horizon, but we'll talk about that another time. So let's just go into it. Let's go through each letter. Now, to be fair, my strength is not in plain-ass block letters. It's in bubble letters because that's what I do. So I may struggle with this a little bit. Just a heads up. Let's see, that doesn't even look as much as I want. You want to make sure that when you put in the center, like the hole in the center, that your distance between the top here and the bottom here is about the same to give it that symmetry look. It takes practice. Don't even stress if you can't get, as you can see, I'm not even the best at these. Now B can be a difficult one. Imagine that you have a line running right here, and that would be where that stem of the B is. Line it up with that. The trick here is to make sure that this line here and this line here are in line with each other like this. That will make it look like it's supposed to look rather than something odd. Now with C, the biggest deal here is to try and make sure that this whole thing stays as consistent as possible, and an easy way to do that is to draw your two little lines and then just connect them. And if your two little lines are the same length, then the biggest issue you're going to have is running this corner right here and making sure that stays consistent. For D, the big D, yeah buddy, again, you want to imagine that imaginary line going down here, and so you just draw in and you try and keep it as consistent as possible. I'm just going to be repeating consistent over and over again. Now E is fairly easy. You just imagine that this width here and this width here are about the same. Keep it that way. Same with F. Now remember, when you start doing bubble letters and shit, this situation here where you want those to be equal to each other, that changes. But we're not doing bubble letters, we're doing block letters, which is kind of the beginning of the whole thing. It's a lot of fun to mess with block letters and bubble letters and make them your own special fancy way. The problem you run into, and if you've ever tried to draw like anime, not even anime, if you've ever tried to draw like chibis or kawaii, then you've discovered that even though it seems like it should be simple because they're relatively simple drawings, and notice I'm muttering through this, but honestly, there's really, you're just trying to keep consistent here and here, here and here, 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 here. If you've ever had to draw or tried to draw kawaii or like little chibis and you're like, how are mine not looking so cute and adorable even though I'm drawing cute little like wacky distorted, adorable looking things? Well, that's probably because even though, yes, you're exaggerating features, there's still some sort of technique to what you exaggerate and what you don't to give it that same look. It's the same kind of deal with bubble lettering and block lettering. If you want to exaggerate things to make them look cool, you have to follow some certain guidelines in the first place to sort of jump off from, not just willy-nilly making things bigger or skinnier, because that can look all over the place and sloppy. Now for the K, one of the pitfalls that you run into with K is having this line here go off track. Now see how that like went diagonal in this direction? You don't want that. So when you're practicing K, draw these two lines for this stem and make sure that they are, that is totally crooked, motherfucker. Draw these two lines for this stem, right? So it's nice and straight. Then draw that down straight before you do anything else, and draw this guy up straight before you do anything else. And that will help you keep those straight. Then you come off like this and bring it down. And then when you come into this, this is when you're going to want to practice, but you're going to want to do this area right here, which I refer to as the K pants or the K vagina. You want to make sure you keep this little flat area, because if you do this, it just doesn't look quite as right. That little K pants area really helps tie the letter together. You'll hear me talk about K pants a lot more in the future if you follow for bubble lettering and shit like that. It's one of my favorite things to say. L is pretty straightforward. You'll just notice the concentration comes in keeping these areas consistent with each other and making sure your corners are actually corners. When you get to bubble letters, you start rounding them off, but by keeping the corners in when you're first learning, the reason that that's helpful is because it helps define where you're starting and stopping things. It's a lot easier to make your widths consistent if you're adding these defined corners and then drawing your lines out. It gives you a little bit of a like oomph. Now for M, you're gonna bring it down like this and bring it up like this. And then you do the same thing, just make sure these are lined up and draw the same width and the same width here. Draw those down. I'm doing this, notice, this is not how I generally do it. Generally, if I draw it, I just draw it like this because I've done it enough times where I understand kind of the motion of it. The way I was showing you is a way to help you keep these things as consistent as possible. And like the K pants, I tend to not leave the pointy parts on things like an M. I don't like the look of it. You can put them if you like the look of it. I can't even draw it without feeling like it looks weird. It's not something I enjoy. So I don't generally do it. But if you don't, just try and keep these kinds of areas consistent. If you're going to do a pointy M, make sure the N is also pointy. And I'll show you here. Now notice I did all of those lines first and then connected them to make the N. If I was just drawing it out without trying to take my time to be consistent, you get the hang of the feeling of it. But if you wanted to do a pointy version, not something I do personally, so see if I can actually do this without feeling freaking weird. Like, you can do that. It's just not something I like. I think it looks kind of janky personally. Now for O, the big O face, put your O inside your O, and just try your hardest. I didn't do a very good job to keep all of these areas consistent. If it helps you, you can always draw down like this with a pencil, these little like marks in the middle, and then just connect them as you go around. I did not do this correctly, but you get the idea. You draw sort of guidelines and use those to help make sure that your O stays even with itself. P, like the D, yeah, the D. Imagine that there's a line right here, and that's like where you start this, and bring it around. And bubble lettering Q is actually kind of handy because you're exaggerating or under exaggerating things, but for this, it's a little bit more of a pain in the ass. You just want to try and keep everything as consistent. This might be one you may want to not try and freehand as much. You may want to draw yourself a guide and draw around your situation here. To get the practice for the motion of it. R is a combination of P and K. You want to remember the K pants, except here it's the R pants, and then this area here, and that was a little bit more. Now you notice here that this right here is not consistent with the rest of it, and now notice that R looks kind of wonky. That's what happens when you're not paying attention to your distance between all of the different areas to kind of try and keep it looking regular. Now S is a bitch for people. Just draw your lines where you want to have them. And that will help you keep the S like that. But S like Q, I would highly suggest you trace around it. But you'll notice, and I'll say this a lot when you're tracing around any S's, don't make your S super curved like this to trace around it. Just kind of flatten it out a little bit because it makes it a lot easier to create the S around it. If it's more curvy like this, you start like getting super close and it just starts to become a mess. So try and avoid that if possible. Now for T, you draw your lines in, just trying to keep things. That was super sloppy, but you kind of get the point. U, give yourself a couple lines, loop around to them on one side, loop around to them on the other, and unlike what I did here, make sure that your lines are the same width. Fuck. Now for V, again, you can leave the point if you want to. I choose not to do the point, so I do 3 lines that are all kind of the same size as each other, and then I just connect them, these two, to these two. Then I bring this one down and bring this one down, trying to make sure that this is about the same as that. And it just, again, it takes practice. The reason I keep emphasizing practice is because bubble lettering and block lettering is difficult, like I said before. You need to just get the hang of it and not give up. So for W, you can just draw 3 lines, 2 lines, all about the same width. And then just connect them down. And that generally gives you a decent looking W. For Y, it depends on how you do your Y. I do mine like this because I found that I like it better. You could do it like this if you really want to, if this is what you like. This is also super sloppy, but you get the point of it. And then Z, and I'm not happy with the Z on the worksheet, I will let you know, but I just went with it because I tried like 8 times and got over it. This one is so much better, holy shit. Okay, you have this for the top, this for the bottom. Draw it out to the end, put it right here instead, that's better. So that these are equal to each other, and then these also are equal to each other. Then you just draw in, and then you connect these two, bring this down, and then connect these two. Now when you're putting block letters together as words, I've been requested to make sure I keep these in the video, so I'm going to. We're not going to be talking spacing right now, but to be honest, block letters, generally speaking, are fairly easy to space if you're just writing in a straight line. You just write them out like that. Now, if you want to exaggerate them a little bit, which we'll talk about later, but just talking about like sizing, you just need to look for spaces where you can. Like here, I'm going to make the L bigger to create kind of a pocket right here to which I can put the O. And then I'm going to make the C bigger to create another pocket. And then I'm gonna make the K smaller here, but then drag it up. And I'm just working with the space that I have to create that. That's just exaggerating and de-exaggerating things. Once you get the hang of the letters, it's pretty simple to create cool headers and stuff. Then you can color them in, or you can shade them in, or add some drop shadows, all of which we'll be talking about later. And then if you want, you can add yourself some, like a colon, which, you know, just imagine that there's the dots and you're just tracing around them. They make great headers. We're gonna talk about lowercase block letters next week, and then you can see how you can put them together in words with upper and lowercase. Now that wasn't so bad, was it? Okay, it was probably, I got frustrated doing it, but like I said, part of it's because I'm just so used to doing bubble letters that block letters are almost like difficult for me now, which is strange, but regardless. If you would like the worksheets, there's 3 of them that come along with this episode. They're basically practice sheets that give you guides to trace over and over again to get the hang of it. If you want these, they're available in the Llamas Love Lettering Facebook group on Facebook. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to say that without sounding kind of redundant. My website is going to be, I've said this so many times in the last year and a half, but my website is going to be undergoing some changes in the next month or so, and they'll be there soon, hopefully, as well, if you are not on Facebook. But for right now, the best place for you to get them is in the Facebook group. So just go on Facebook, search Llamas Love Lettering. You'll find the group. I'll add you in. You can share your lettering, get the worksheets. No big deal. So next week, we're going to be doing lowercase block letters, which, God, pour one out for me because I hate doing lowercase, but I am forcing myself to get better at it this year. I told myself I'd be better at certain fonts this year, and that's on the list. And I know a lot of other people like having those, so that's coming next week. Soon in the next few weeks, we are also going to be looking at shading because I know people were interested in it for our last round of lettering, so that'll come as well. And bubble letters are on the horizon. There's a lot of shit on the horizon, so make sure you subscribe if you haven't already to make sure that you are here, and hit the little notification bell so you can find out when I post fucking videos, because why wouldn't you want to? Aren't I that entertaining? Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.